Welcome back to Invent. This is a segment on computer science, and this is the fourth installment in the video series. We are introducing functions, and remember, this is just functions in general. We are not going into a specific language quite yet. My name is Zack. I'm a freshman at the University of Michigan's College of Engineering. I am intending to study chemical engineering, and my favorite song is Take It Easy by the Eagles. I'm a big fan of the nice soft country rock feel of the Eagles and just any soft rock of the 60s, 70s, and 80s in general. I'm a big old music person. For the agenda, we are going to review conditional statements and loops first, and then I'm going to introduce functions, their purpose, the applications, and the different parts of a function. And you do not need any materials for this video besides the device you're watching on. So just a little bit of review. Conditional statements allow code to run if a condition is met, if a certain Boolean statement is true, or is false if that's in the conditional statement. And these conditional statements may use an if, else structure. They can just be a bunch of if statements. They could be an if, else if, or an if, else. There's so many different varieties. And as far as loops go, loops allow code to run multiple times over, and you can use a while loop if you know how many iterations, or if you don't know how many iterations you're going to go through, and if you know the exact amount of iterations you want to go through, you're going to use a for loop. So what exactly is a function? A function is a method. It performs any given task, and it's kind of like the molecules of coding, if we're going back to the chemistry analogy. And the operators, the data types, and loops and if statements are just kind of like atoms and bonds and interactive forces, and these functions are now the molecules of coding, and this is really what makes like long segments of code better. And functions can be called within other functions, so some functions are kind of on the perimeter, and they just get bigger and bigger. And for example, one built-in function to a lot of different languages counts the number of characters in a string and returns that number as an int. And another example of a function is you could create a function that prints a chew every time a Boolean is allergy season is true, using a for loop or such. Alright, the first part of a function is an argument. After you define the function, a function might take in one or more variables. It may not as well. It could have 0 arguments. But the variables that a function would take in are called arguments. And to create a function that adds an between every word, you would have to pass in a string that would insert between the words in the string. And to create a function that prints the answer is before a number, you would have to pass in an int as an argument in order to create that function. Return values are also important parts of functions. A function may return a value, but it might not also. If it doesn't, it's considered to be of type void. And some void functions, a lot of functions that just use print statements and don't keep track of a final variable, are going to be void. In Java, the main method is a void method. And so, for example, if you wanted to create a function that just prints toodles, you don't need to pass anything into it in order for that code to work, so that function can be void. But to create a function that doubles the value of a certain number, you would probably want to insert that number as an argument, and the function would return that number as an int or a double. If you wanted it to be void, you could certainly create a function that prints the value of double its argument, but if you wanted to return the value, then you would have to use a return statement. So our final activity is to look through these questions and get an answer, and then I will briefly go over the answers in just a minute. I'll let you think for a while. Pause the video while you do so, and I'll go over the answers in a second. Alright, so to create a function that returns the average value of a set of 5 integers, how many arguments must be passed in? Well, since you have a set of 5 integers, you're probably going to have 5 arguments that are integers. You could also, you don't know this yet, but you could also create an array or a list of these integers, but that's more advanced. So we'll stick with 5 arguments. All of them are going to be integers. These arguments, like I just said, would have to be of type integer or int. And how many values must the function return? Well, you want just the average value of a set of 5 integers. So you're just going to return one value. And of what type must the return value be? Well, from what we know so far, you would have to return an int because you're doing calculations using an int. There is a way to cast the integers as doubles, and then you could return an average value as a double. But for now, we'll stick with integer will have to be the type of return value. The second part, to create a function that counts the number of vowels in a 5-paragraph essay, how many arguments must be passed in? Well, from what we've learned so far, this 5-paragraph essay would probably be stored in a string, and so you would only need one argument, and that would be just the string. And so therefore the type of the argument would have to be string. How many values must the function return? Well, you're just counting the number of values, the number of vowels in a 5-paragraph essay. So you're going to return an integer, so that'll answer the next question, and you only want one integer because you're just counting. And based on what you've learned so far about computer science, is there a better or more efficient way to do this? And the answer is yes. Computer science is just fascinating because it just builds on itself and builds on itself. And I've talked a little bit about how you can use arrays and lists in this in the previous example, and you can certainly do the same thing here. You can create an array of sentences or just words or even characters. Personally, I would do words. That would be the easiest, and go through each word in an array and count the number of vowels. That would be far more readable and most likely more efficient too. And this concludes the video on functions. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.